Welcome to the Great Lakes Conference evening practice management presentations. I'm Jeff Frederick, and tonight we're going to have a couple great lectures on practice management and improving your practices. The first lectures are going to be separated into part one, part two, and then later on, after these lectures, will be essential adaptations, MIPS in 2021, which you're going to want to hear. So sit back and enjoy some great practice management information. And thanks for coming to the Great Lakes Conference. Great Lakes Conference. I just want to take a minute to thank the Great Lakes Conference for inviting us to provide some practice management lectures. First, we're going to start with something giving you a different perspective of what's going on in successful medical practices. And we call it the new competitive edge in healthcare. And we're going to get to what that new competitive edge is and something that you should think about. My name is Jeff Frederick. I have been a past president of the MPMA and also a past president of the AAPPM. So let's talk about what we know about very successful practices. There are consistent common themes among most of these successful practices. They may attack issues differently, but they all at the core have something that makes them very, very successful. And they are considered what I would call the $1 million practices. They have these keys that they all follow and they all do that make them extremely successful. Today, we're going to talk about one of those themes. There are several, but we're only going to cover one. And you should begin by asking yourself, why not me? Why don't I have what's considered a $1 million practice? We know that all of us have the ability to have that, but some of us have achieved it. Just as a reference, there is a book that was written that talks about many of these themes I'm going to talk about. It's called The $1 Million Practice, and I just happen to be one of the authors, co-author with Dr. John Juliana. And that book is actually being released as we speak, and I just thought I'd reference it because it's full of some great stuff. So the new competitive edge in healthcare is the common theme I want to talk about today. And it's not what you think. First of all, a lot of people are under old misconceptions that it really matters if I am board certified by 12,000 boards, I'm a wound care specialist, I'm a American College of Foot Surgeon, I'm this, I'm that. It really, honestly, to be blunt, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter much to the people that you're trying to attract to your office, your clients, your patients. And one of the things that differentiates you from most of the other practices down the street or in your state or city is not what you think. It's actually first-class customer service. So healthcare has evolved beyond, I want the best doctor. Everybody wants the best doctor, but they have no way of really judging that. What they do judge, and what most people do judge, and you can see that on Yelp reviews and all over the web, is actually how they were treated or what's considered first-class customer service. That, my friends, is the new frontier in healthcare. That is going to distinguish you from other offices. A patient gaining what we call that wow feeling while navigating through your office is only the true experience that a patient will remember in the end. And this feeling that they get will prompt them to refer others like themselves to your practice. So the only way that you're going to get busier is not advertising or putting out there that you are the best or you have this degree or that degree. It's really providing boots on the ground, first-class customer service. If your customer service is better than anyone else's, you're going to outshine. And that's one of the basic principles of the $1 million practices. And if you think about it, it's true in every industry. It just took a while to get around to medicine. In the past, medicine doctors were the ultimate authority, and it didn't matter how they treated you, as long as you went to the best. Well, right now, we have a whole generation of people considering the best of how they got treated. So outshining your competition is one of the things you really need to think about. And every single $1 million practice that John and I have explored and helped and consulted with, they all have this basic theme of first-class service. Well, you might be thinking, well, how do I get that? How is it that I'm going to be able to get this first-class customer service? I can't just will it and say, okay, we're going to have first-class customer service. Well, you have to begin with the building blocks. And the building blocks in your office are the people around you, your staff. Those are the primaries. Quite often we used to hear of people saying, yeah, I like the doctor, but his staff sucks. And they're certainly not going to refer somebody to your office if that's the case. So you have to build around yourself people that understand, what your primary goals of this office. So I wish this idea had really come from John and I, but it really comes from Jim Collins, author of Good to Great. And he was referring to getting the right people on the bus. And the bus, of course, is your practice. And he noted that executives who went from good to great didn't start with figuring out where to drive the bus. This was an old theme that we've all had in our head. Oh, you got bus too. You got to know the direction you're going to go to in order to become successful. That's the first step. In essence, it's not. People that became very successful in the last few years have figured out it's much more important to get the right people on the bus, to get the right people in those seats with you and the wrong people off their bus. And then you can figure out how we're going to drive it to our ultimate goal. And if you think about all the problems you have in an office, the difficulties of people doing what you want them to do, understanding why it's important, getting those correct people that are self-motivators. They can manage themselves. Some of your headaches are taken away because those are the right people. Those are the people that understand the patient is first, customer service is first. You don't need to fire them up. You don't need to manage them, micromanage what they do, because they'll be self-motivated. They're interested in being part of this greater purpose of what your office is about. So that getting the right people, right seats on the bus is probably more important than you think. So you're the driver of the bus. We know that. The doctor is going to give the ultimate direction. But you have to fill it with these right people. The right people in the right seats is what it's called throughout Jim Collins' book. So it's really important that you look around your office now. If you want to take that step to get and motivate to the $1 million practice level, you're going to have to look around at the people that you have. And I think a lot of offices have settled for, well, this is who works here, it's not as bad. And you get used to the grumpy people. You get used to the people that don't see to details, and you overlook it. Well, it's hard to find people. No. If you look at all these successful practices out there, the ones that are the $1 million practices, they don't settle. They find the right people. They're out there, and they're out there, and they want to work. You just can't hire quickly. The old saying, hire slowly, fire quickly. And that's the way you should be thinking about it. So this quote is from Maya Angelou, and it's a really famous quote, but think about this. People may forget what you said or what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And if you interpret that for your office, think about that. Somebody coming through your office, you can say a lot to them. You can have great results, which we expect you to have, but you can have bad results too with a patient. But it's how you, in essence, made them feel like they were the only thing on earth when they came through that office, that their needs and the questions they have and how you treated them is what they're ultimately going to remember. It becomes an emotional attachment that makes them want to refer people to your office. It makes them want to come back and into your office because they feel that success and that need and acceptance. And that's a hard thing to achieve. You may say it, but you've got to live it in your office. So I thought that this quote by Maya Angelou was really appropriate to this presentation. So all that matters is that the patients feel that they are being treated well. You can't argue with success of these $1 million practices that they're achieving. And this common basic theme is probably what I would consider the first primary building block to getting a practice that way. You have to remember how you think about your practice begins with your attitude. You have to have that mindset that you are a successful business, and all businesses, whether it's a restaurant, a drugstore, wherever you go, first-class customer service makes the difference. Remember, there are businesses that provide the same services that you do all around you. And you have to have that making people feel great is just as important as your outcomes. I'm not saying outcomes aren't important. They certainly are. But you have to think of how you make them feel as just as important as outcomes can be. Think of it this way. A patient will tolerate almost anything as long as they feel like they're getting first-class customer service. Think about it in a restaurant that you go to. There are restaurants that food is mediocre, but the waitstaff is great. When I walk in, they know what table I like to sit at. They know what I'm going to drink. How does that make you feel? It makes you feel great. Will you return to that restaurant even though the food's not a 10? Yeah, probably you will, because finding that expert first-class customer service is something that you can't find that often. And it's certainly present in every $1 million practice. Think about this. When a patient needs surgery, how do they usually judge the surgeon or which one they're going to go with? It's not the thousands of medical degrees on their wall. It's how comfortable they feel when they're talking to the surgeon. Most choose how comfortable they feel, and that becomes the choice. And it's the same with referrals. The feeling of being appreciated is far more important than anything. So we know that customer service has 3 layers, and then we're talking about your patients. They fall into one of these 3 categories, what we call dissatisfiers. Things that a patient experiences that will cause them never to return. We know things happen. There are the satisfiers, simply meeting the patient's expectations. Yeah, it was an office. Yeah, it was clean. Yeah, they said hello. Sometimes they'll refer you someone, sometimes they won't. And then there's the delighters, going above and beyond and giving the patient an experience that they'll always remember. This will get you referrals, and this will get you a lot of referrals. This is the basic primary goal that you're trying to achieve. So when you meet with your staff and you explain why we're here, that's what you want. You want every single patient, after they leave your office on the way out, to say, this is a delighter. This is not a dissatisfier or a satisfier. This is a delighter patient. That's the goal we're after. So your first step towards greatness is customer service, one of the cornerstones needed for any success. You got to remember, you're not an island, and the people around you, you could be the greatest customer service doctor ever. But if the people around you are not adopting the same type of attitude and don't understand where we need to go with this office and why we're here, you'll never be successful. Every single $1 million practice that John and I reviewed had this as a basic common theme, that first-class customer service, whatever it took to get that patient happy and feel at home and feel comfortable, was what we were going to do. So remember, people on the bus, the imaginary bus, are just as important as who's driving it. It's no longer just a thought pattern of, well, I need to command what's going to go on here. You really need people around you that you probably don't even have to tell what to do. They know what to do. They know where the ultimate goal is going. So accepting first-class customer service is the new frontier in healthcare. If you read a lot about healthcare and what they talk about in the new challenges of this century, it's all about first-class customer care. That's the new fight, and that's where you're going to make a difference. You have to be an early adopter of what transpires in medicine. Medicine is not static, it's dynamic. And as attitudes change and patients change, patients are looking for that. That is more important than anything else you possibly could say or do. Medicine is an evolutionary change, so you have to change with it. And the people that are making these changes, the early adopters, are the ones that are going to easily achieve the $1 million practice. Because how hard is it going to be if everybody around you adopted first-class customer service? Then you've lost that edge. You have to go to the next step. What's next in healthcare that's going to make it important? So basically, that's the first theme that you need to understand in achieving $1 million practice. And I'm often asked, well, what are the other themes? Well, there's plenty of other themes, common things that each practice has adapted. But for today, I just want something simple for you. Learn first-class customer service, how to achieve it, how it's important. Remember, you're a business. We all accept that. We're not just the ultimate on the pedestal. I'm a doctor's office. Everybody's going to do what I say. Not necessarily. And this is, we often hear about malpractice cases, and what's the first thing they talk about? The relationship between the office and the patient broke down. That can never happen in an office that provides first-class service. So not only is it a great practice management piece for building a practice, but it's also something to protect you. So there you have it. And again, thank you. And our book is coming right out. So there you go.
Hello, everyone. And again, this is John Juliana. At this point, what we're going to do is talk about one of those things in our lives that we all hate to do, but we realize that without it, we simply don't have a livelihood. Of course, that thing we're talking about is charting. We're going to talk about your charting efficiency and compliance and help you understand how to perform this task more safely in an age where it's becoming more and more perilous and threatening to our business. First, a little bit of disclosure. As many of you know, I am an executive vice president of Podiatry Risk Group. Podiatry Risk Group is a company designed specifically for podiatrists, and their products and services help mitigate the administrative risks associated with practicing podiatry. The company was actually born out of a necessity caused by a significant ramping up of third-party payer audits and penalties. I think we're all aware of this very ominous trend happening right now that's costing our profession millions of dollars in paybacks. Let me start by prefacing that I know darn well that there is really no such thing as a great electronic health record. As an owner of an EHR company, I can tell you that honestly and frankly. We speak to executives of other electronic health record companies across the nation, and the common theme is always that there will always be things about an EHR that is problematic in the practice of medicine. But again, it's one of those necessary evils that we simply have to accept. But today what I hope to do is give you some tips on how to improve your interaction and experience with this technology, as well as hopefully open your mind up to some innovative alternatives that can really help protect your practice in its use of the electronic health record. So a while back, the Cerner Corporation did a study and found that shockingly, for each patient encounter, physicians spend an average of 16 minutes interacting with their electronic health record. 16 minutes of every encounter are wasted fiddling around with technology and not necessarily paying attention to the patient. Ironically, that doesn't even mean that the doctor kept themselves timely in the creation of their chart note, because the same study also shows that doctors spend 11% of their off hours getting caught up on their chart notes. So 11% of their weekends, family time, etc., are spent just trying to get caught up. And the real kick in the pants is that despite all of that time, physicians are still not producing adequate chart notes. What you're looking at here is the 2018 Medicare improper payment rates. Notice that of all of the improper documentation for podiatry, 78.2% of it was as a result of insufficient documentation. 2.3% was actually caused by no documentation whatsoever. Now, what does that translate into in terms of dollars and cents? Well, this is across all specialties. Insufficient documentation amounted to $17.7 million. No documentation was over $800 million. Lack of medical necessity was $6.7 million. So economically, charting creates a $1 billion treasure chest that third-party payers can recover money from. Now I hope that you understand why audits have been significantly ramping up and will continue to do so. It potentially creates an economic windfall for CMS and other private payers. So what are some of the things that auditors frequently look for and find in chart notes that begins the process of opening up that treasure chest for them? Well, first, auditors are extremely critical of boilerplate templates. So again, this is one of the fundamental problems associated with an electronic health record. Most of them function by the use of templates. But it's not the template itself that's problematic. It's the fact that out of complacency, we often just click the template, and the template alone does not necessarily tell the unique story behind that unique patient. Occasionally, to compensate for that, physicians will then engage in what auditors refer to as note bloat. In order to create what visually looks like a robust and comprehensive chart note, doctors will often put things in the chart note that are meaningless, trivial, and inconsequential. Perhaps that also allows the doctor to feel more comfortable to code at a higher level. Whatever the rationale, auditors find it extremely lucrative to their mission. And lastly, and this is going to become particularly important this year in 2021, chart notes often lack telling the story of medical necessity behind the service. And I'll talk a little bit more about medical necessity shortly. So before I go any further, let me give you a little bit of a look under the hood of my brain, if you will, and how I think about business. In any business that I've ever engaged in, I've always looked at it as a game of chess. In a chess game, you need to have a strategy. That strategy includes not only responding to your opponent's last move, but even trying to see 2 or 3 moves in the future. So please keep my business philosophy in mind as we talk about charting and its challenges and the new innovations that are now arising. So what can we immediately change in our game of chess and its strategy? Let's make sure that you are bulletproof in your documentation policies and procedures. First, you need to make sure that you ensure compliance across the entire practice. You should have a coding policy and a procedure manual that all staff is educated on. You should be providing coding and compliance education to anyone in the practice who deals with either coding or documentation. You should have regular and consistent communication between your billing department and the physicians. There should be regular monitoring of the charting and compliance program, and if you haven't done so in a while, you should engage in an internal audit. Now, if you're going to perform an internal audit, I strongly suggest that you consider outsourcing this to a third-party, unbiased expert. Sometimes it's very difficult to be honest and objective when the audits are performed by the very people that they affect. So consider outsourcing it. Put it in the hands of an expert. And trust me on this. Don't worry about anything being confidential or with judgments. Everything that's going to be done is going to be done confidentially and without any judgment whatsoever. Don't ever feel shy or worried about exposing your deficiencies to an expert. Let's face it, you're much better off allowing them to find your deficiencies as opposed to the bad guys. Then you should practice the 10 principles of documentation. Now, most of these 10 principles are completely common sense. First, your medical records should be complete, legible, and make sense in telling the unique story of that particular patient encounter. Secondly, the documentation for each patient needs to include the date and the reason the patient is in your office, their history and physical behind the chief complaint, particularly for a new patient, the review of any labs or x-rays where appropriate, and of course the assessment and the plan for care. Number three, the past and present diagnosis should easily be accessible to whomever is treating that patient. Number four, the reason that you ordered x-rays or lab tests or DME products should be documented. This is essential for medical necessity purposes, and it's especially going to become more important this year in 2021. Number five, the relevant health risk factors should be identified, as well as what potentially could happen without the treatment. Again, this is all going to be especially important this year in 2021. And number six, the patient's prognosis, their response to treatment, non-compliance, etc., should all be documented. Number seven of our list of 10, the plan for care needs to include your treatments and medications, any referrals, any education that you provided to the patient or their family, specific instructions for follow-up, as well as potentially the time that you spent on or with the patient, which of course you know is going to be important this year in 2021. Number eight, all entries to the medical records naturally needs to be dated and authenticated through an electronic signature. Number nine, the CPT and diagnosis codes reported on the billing claim need to reflect the documentation in the medical record. I think that's common sense. And then lastly, number 10, the completion and signing of the medical record needs to be contemporaneous to the date of care. So what does that actually mean? Well, there's really nothing concrete regarding the definition of contemporaneous, but I would suggest that your medical records for both compliance and medical legal reasons are completed within 24 to 48 hours from the time of care. So in essence, your medical records need to be accurate, relevant, complete, timely, and of course, confidential. Now, why is it that we often fall short of any of what I just talked about? Well, some of the things that I frequently hear is, well, this is the way I was taught to do it, or this is what the carrier told me to do, or I've been coding this way for years. Why is this just a problem now? Or everybody does it this way, or a consultant or a mentor told me to do it this way. Or perhaps this is the way the vendor who sells the device told me to bill it. So as I begin to wind down on the first part of this discussion, I want to talk a little bit more about medical necessity, because this year in 2021, it's going to become more important than ever. I think it's probably obvious to you that a physician usually has a completely different understanding or interpretation of medical necessity than a third-party payer or an auditor has. And I know that's frustrating, and as frustrating as it might be, we all should wonder just how medical necessity can sometimes be left in the hands of lay people over a physician. But that's just the unfortunate state of reality right now. Your chart note needs to tell a story. In order to spell out medical necessity, your chart note should clearly identify the severity of the signs and symptoms the patient is presenting with. It should spell out the probability of a positive outcome or even an adverse outcome should the patient not receive this type of treatment. And of course, your chart note needs to spell out why there is a need for diagnostic studies or interventions or even products. And this is exactly where using LCD language is crucial in your charting. LCD stands for Local Coverage Determinations. They are the decisions that are made by Medicare Administrative Contractors, or MACs, as to whether to cover a particular item or service in that particular jurisdiction. The max decision is based on whether the service or item is considered reasonable and necessary based upon your documentation. So I've provided a link here that I think everybody will find easy to use to help look up the LCDs for any applicable CPT code. Keep in mind that not all CPT codes have LCDs associated with them, but you really need to know the language that is covered under that LCD so you can import that into your chart note. So now back to my game of chess that I talked about earlier. As a result of everything that I just spoke about, I emphatically believe that the way we are forced to use an electronic health record could actually be putting us in jeopardy, putting us in harm's way. Doctors need to get away from being mouse and template driven, in my opinion. The point and click templates are not only dangerous because they lead us down a pathway of insufficiency, but they're archaic, disruptive, and certainly don't help us drive quality care through quality clinical protocols. We need to have a different chess strategy. So what could be our next chess move? Well, there are certainly alternatives to templates. When I first came out in practice, most of us were dictating our chart notes and sending that dictation off to a transcriptionist to create our SOAP note. Well, as long as you know the phrases and words to meet the medical necessity, this is certainly still a viable option. The problem with this is that it's generally very costly. Well, hiring a scribe is a great alternative to that. A well-trained scribe can allow you to stay focused on the patient and take the daunting task of charting off of your plate. But again, the scribe still needs to know how to tell that medical necessity story. And this also comes at an expense, naturally. The more cost-effective method of using a scribe nowadays involves virtual scribes. There are now companies that offer offshore scribes that interact directly with your electronic health record. For example, HelloRace is a perfect example of such a company. But again, while this may solve the efficiency challenge for you, the scribe still needs to know exactly how to meet the compliance component of charting. And then lastly, there are voice recognition programs. Well, voice recognition has evolved tremendously over the past several years, and the accuracy associated with these platforms is really now phenomenal. Voice recognition programs like Dragon Medical One are very cost effective and make your charting very efficient. But that alone still has the concern of compliance, the compliance component behind the charting. And so this is where a new innovative product of Podiatry Risk Group comes in, known as Speakeasy. Speakeasy solves both the efficiency challenge as well as the compliance challenge associated with charting. It changes the chess strategy for you. Speakeasy is powered by Dragon Medical One and uses it as its backbone, but it's much, much more than just Dragon software. Speakeasy comes preloaded with hundreds of podiatry-specific commands. These commands are simple sentences that lead to LCD-compliant verbiage. The commands are categorized by chief complaint, exams, and plans, and each command contains what are known as voice-activated variables that allow that chart note to become highly unique for that particular patient. Each command has been built under the guidance of compliance and coding experts. For example, Dr. Jeff Learman was instrumental in helping us build the commands of Speakeasy to tell that medical necessity story. Your chart note now becomes extremely fast and efficient, as well as highly compliant. and Speakeasy can be used with virtually any electronic health record. So I've put the Podiatry Risk Group website here on the slide in case anybody is interested, and I encourage you to visit that website and you can see how Speakeasy works, or even better yet, you can request one of our sales team to have a live demo performed for you. And of course, this is my email. Please don't hesitate to email me or reach out to me with any questions that you might have.
Hello, my name is Dr. Ingrid Steins, and welcome to the MPMA Great Lakes seminar. I am pleased to share with you some information today regarding some new technology that I've incorporated in my practice. I want to start off by saying that I hope everyone is well out there with the pandemic. And I know that the pandemic has created a lot of additional stress in our day-to-day practice life as we have to secure additional PPE, make sure that our offices are disinfected to the highest level possible. And we have been weathering the storm of the financial impact upon our practices from the pandemic. This is on top of what we've already had to rise to in the many challenges of operating the day-to-day practice needs in our office, as well as seeing patients. And so during the shutdown, the state-mandated shutdown earlier in the spring, as our patient volume dramatically dropped, like many of yours did in your practices and across the country, it gave me time to pause and take a hard look at my practice and a hard look at my life and decide what are the things that I could do in my practice that would decrease the burnout, decrease the stress level, decrease the amount of time that was devoted to the practice, and give me back a little bit of life-work balance, if you will, that I think we're all looking to achieve. I know I'm not alone with this problem of documentation, although an EHR has been a wonder in many, many aspects. It also creates challenges for physicians across specialties and across the board. So a couple statistics that I have read is that for every minute we spend face-to-face providing patient care, we are spending an equal amount of time documenting that note. In some studies, it's even estimated that for every minute we spend with the patient, we spend 2 times or 2 minutes in the EHR system. So over the course of a day and weeks and months, that's hours and hours and hours of time that is not devoted to patient care, that we're really not getting properly reimbursed for. And I personally got tired of documenting after work, after hours, in the evening, early mornings, and on weekends. And I know I'm not alone in that. Physicians across the country are experiencing this similar problem. So during the shutdown, I decided to acquire a product called Speakeasy. It was provided by Podiatry Risk Group, and it has really, really made a big difference in my practice and reducing the amount of time it takes to document a note. So although I had templates within my own EHR system that I had personalized and built, there was still an awful lot of pointing and clicking and scrolling and typing. And I'm a pretty fast keyboardist, but it was still taking an awful lot of time to complete a note. So what I like about Speakeasy is they have literally hundreds of podiatric templates, including for the chief complaint, the exam, and the plan. Those templates are extremely thorough. There's been a lot of research done behind the scenes, consultation with APMA to make sure that those templates are LCD compliant. So I like that assurance as well. In addition, I liked my templates, and so some of those templates I kept, and Speakeasy was able to customize and even combine their template with my template, which was really nice. I appreciated that customization, and customer service did an excellent job in editing those templates for me. I also like the feature of the Dragon that comes with the system, the Dragon Medical One, so that if I want to dictate in addition, let's say in the plan, I'm able to do that, giving the chart just much more a customizable look, if you will. So now I feel that the chart is just a more solid chart, if you will. It would hold up in any type of chart review or audit situation, or God forbid a malpractice situation. I feel proud sending those notes over to the primary care provider, something that they can easily read and refer to when need be. And I'll tell you, the first day that I went home and didn't have a chart to do for that day was like a huge, heavy boulder that someone took off my shoulders. So I wanted to share that with you because it's been a long time since I can honestly say I incorporated something in my practice that made such a huge difference in my life. So if you share some of my same concerns, experiencing a little chart burnout, want to have something that's complete and know that there's a company there that has your back and wants to make sure that you're properly protected in an audit situation, I would suggest taking a look at Speakeasy. Thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you in person in the very near future. Stay safe in the interim.